And this is something that a lot of people do not discuss, that we need to be discussing more. Because, sorry, by the way, because they serve food here at nighttime. Restaurants hate when I give this lecture. But for the most part, it's something, we have to really consider. And people say, well, what about the winter time? It gets dark so early and so on. We're going to talk about that. But we look at the design and we look at these things and we look at everything we've been designed to do. There's a design. Let's look at an example. Every food is supposed to have a stage to it. That's the design of it. You have a ripening stage, which most people eat food in that stage when they shouldn't. Then you have a stage where it's fresh. Then you have a stage where it rots. And if you eat at the right time, the right way, with the right attitude, you're not stressed out, you'll be fine. Most people eat stressed out at the wrong time, the wrong foods. Think, oh, this raw food doesn't make me feel well. So if it doesn't rot, if it doesn't have that stage, that's not food. You can get a Twinkie from 20 years ago and have it in the same wrapper today and look the same exact way. That's not food. We have to understand. There's an intelligent design that tells us exactly the way to do these things. And I mean, how much more to be? Well, how do we know when to eat? Look out the window. It's daylight and darkness. It's not difficult to tell when the sun goes down and when the sun is up and so on. But some people, they'll make a challenge for themselves to try to convince themselves that they can go ahead and do this and so on. Just look at the food itself. When you look at design, you think about the food itself. And you see it right in there. Let's take, for example, a carrot. What part of the body do you think a carrot is good for? Anyone, take a guess. The eyes. How do we know that? How do we know that? Because if you cut it in half, it looks like the iris of an eye. Did you know that? It looks like the iris of an eye. Let's take another example. Celery. Do you know the minerals in celery are good for the bones? What's the shape of celery? The shape of bones. See how it works? How about this one, an avocado? Do you know the oils in an avocado are wonderful for a pregnant woman, and the avocado looks like a womb? You see, design is amazing. I mean, and I'll give you an easy one. You might have to think about this, but I'll make it easy. What about a walnut? Think about it. The brain. The walnut, the oils in the walnut are good for the brain. Look what a walnut looks like, the brain. Now here's another one, a Twinkie. What do you think that's good for? It might look like the pus coming out of some cancer tumor or something else, but it doesn't look like anything I want to put in my body unless we give it a cute name and put a little cute wrapper on it. All of a sudden now people think, oh, well, that's good. See, the marketers get us, the TV programs get it. That's why they call it programming, because they program us to do the things that we shouldn't be doing. Hello? Okay. So that's what we have to. So we have to understand the difference, and everything in nature is work goes along with us. But we've gotten so far away, and this is what we've created a problem. There's three stages to the daylight diet. I don't expect anyone overnight to just start eating the daylight diet, because we're used to eating so much today. We just look at the customs and the customs versus design, and we see what's happened. The first custom we look at is how many times we eat a day to begin with. Where in the world did we ever get in this custom of eating 10 times a day like the average person does today? Now some of you might say, well, I don't eat 10 times a day. Well, yes you do, because there's no little man in the stomach with a computer saying, here comes a snack, or here comes a meal. Anytime you put something in your body has to work to digest it. So, and people between their meals and their snacks and everything else, they're grazing all day, they're just eating all day, and they're eating 10 times a day or so on. So, where do we ever get in this? Because, only 120 years ago, there were only 2 main meals a day. There were 2 main meals a day, only 120 years ago, but now people are eating all. Where it came from was, in the late 80s, this crazy concept of calorie counting came in. All of a sudden, people getting stressed out that they weren't getting enough calories, they had to eat more. And then somebody started this thing of, everyone's worried about these weight issues, and then somebody started this thing called, you should eat many small meals throughout the day, which is probably the worst health advice you can ever get. You should eat many small meals throughout the day. First of all, who's eating small meals? Everyone that's on that philosophy is eating big meals throughout the day. But even so, to eat meal after meal after meal without the last food digestion and put more food on top of it, that's not wise. That's not healthy. Some people say, well, I need to do that to keep my metabolism up. I say, well, don't you understand when you speed up your metabolism, you speed up your aging. You should slow it down. People don't understand. They say, well, why do you need to do that? They go, because I don't want to put on weight. I want to lose weight. I said, well, if you weren't eating so much, maybe you wouldn't be putting on weight to begin with. But that's just his thinking, because the marketers want to get us to eat more. So they tell us we have to eat more and we have to do all this, and it's all this to eat more and more. You'll have more energy, not stimulation, but more energy if you're eating less and eating the right foods. And I hear people say all the time, say, Paul, I know what you're saying, but I just love to eat. I said, well, you eat less, you live longer, and you'll get to eat more. You know, we need to slow down and eat less. It's just a crazy custom that we eat so much. 2 or 3 times a day is the most we need to be eating. 2 times a day is ideal, and 3 at most. And then this other crazy custom of naming our meals. Where did this crazy custom ever come of naming our meals? You know, we even look at the names of meals, and, you know, breakfast was always traditionally the first meal of the day, which is true, but even now it's something different, because back then, breakfast wasn't the same thing as it is today. Today, somebody will jump out of bed even before they're out of bed, they'll grab a donut and go on their way or something else, and they'll wash it down with coffee or something else. Well, only 120 years ago, people would get up at the right time, they'd get up when the sun gets up, and they do their daily activities or their morning chores, and then maybe 2 hours later they'll eat it. So they'll sit down, relax, do a nice breakfast. And breakfast is the greatest name for a meal, because it's the only one that's true, because you're fasting and you're breaking your fast. Break fast. Technically, every meal could be called breakfast. But 120 years ago, there were only 2 main meals. There was breakfast, and then there was the noontime meal. And the noontime meal was called dinner, which means to dine. And now it was only 120 years ago, dinner was the noontime meal. When I read this book, I was real confused, because it kept saying dinner, but he was saying don't eat at night. And I was like, what's going on? But then I found out dinner was traditionally served at noontime. I used to always wonder why my friends from Brooklyn, they have families that came from Europe, on Sundays they used to have the biggest meal of the day at noontime. But every other day, time of the day they didn't, and now I found that out. So dinner was the biggest meal of the day, and then right before somebody went to sleep, usually before the sun went down, but even if it's a little after, they only wanted to eat very light before going to sleep, so they ate something called supper, which was so light, something like soup or something, which was a very light meal before they went to sleep, because unlike today, they didn't want to go to sleep with a heavy stomach. Today, people, all they wanted to, they said, I can't go to sleep unless I'm on a heavy stomach. So they would eat supper, so you had your breakfast, your dinner, and some people ate supper. Now today you got your brunch, lunch, crunch, munch, your midnight snack, your after midnight snack, and all these other names and all these other meals and everything else. And it's just crazy how much people eat today and the names they call and so on. So we have to get away from these customs and get back to what worked and what's worked for a while. When he wrote this book, you know, cancer isn't mentioned in this book. And you read any of these health books from 100 years ago, they don't mention diabetes and all these other things that are so common today. You know, people weren't walking around with all these sicknesses and worrying about all these flus running around and taking these vaccinations for them and everything else. We have to understand what's happening and how far we've gotten away from it. You just look at where we stop. We look at the custom today of the abuse that, you know, the child abuse that doctors do to children as soon as they're born by drugging them up. You know, and if you've done that, don't feel bad, because I was drugged up and I turned out pretty good. But if you haven't done that, don't fall for it. You know, it wasn't done, it wasn't needed back then, it's not needed today. But we have to get back to know what we're doing now. If you want to be successful with the daylight diet, and the reason to eat the right way, and no matter what you're eating, all reason to eat health is this. All health, this is one of those other things you could write down. All health is determined by the quantity and the quality of sleep you get.